Thank you. Okay.
Great. Okay. So, hi everyone. Thank you for coming today for our 2022 High School Student Forum, Tips for Success. My name is Winnie Xu, and I have been the secretary for the Share and Grow Student Board for 2 years now, and I'll be hosting and monitoring this forum. This event is hosted by Share and Grow, and to give a brief introduction, our brand key meaning is to help the future generations grow by encouraging parents to build a strong and healthy community together. That's also our mission, and we also have a vision to obtain and organize information useful for children and make it universally accessible. Share and Grow is a collective group of families who sincerely share information, advice, and insights to grow the better tomorrows. Now on to the main program. We're joined here today with 3 outstanding graduates who have already walked their path through high school. And they are very well equipped to answer questions and give as much advice as possible to future high school students and those nearing their senior year of high school. All right, let's go ahead and introduce our guest speakers. We have Grace Chi, who graduated from Norman North, and she will be attending Cornell to study applied economics and management. Heather Liu, who also graduated from Norman North, will be attending the University of Southern California to study cognitive sciences. And Derek Jang, a Jesuit Dallas graduate who will be attending Cornell School of Engineering as well. Let's go ahead and start with some questions to get to know our guest speakers and what processes they used for success and other things they recommend. At the end, we'll hold a Q&A session with the audience. So hopefully, if your questions go unanswered throughout these presentations, or if you have anything else you want to ask the speakers, you may ask it in the chat then, and we will answer it during that time. This is a chapter index of basically everything we're going to go through. And so we're going to go ahead and start with college application. We'll go ahead and answer in rounds. We'll start with Grace, Heather, and then Derek. And if one of you needs a little more time, that's all right. You can just go ahead and say you need more time. All right, so first question. Which school did you apply for, or which schools for, and which one did you end up picking?
Okay, so I guess I'm going first. I was definitely incredibly fortunate as I had a relatively painless college application process. I only applied to one school and I got into that school. So that was the school I ended up choosing. Because I applied early decision, I didn't have to submit any more applications beyond November. Yeah, so the way I decided on applying to Cornell for my early decision school was that first I knew I was going to try and shoot really high and apply to a more prestigious institution for at least the first try. And because out of all of the Ivy League options, there were only 2 that had an undergraduate business degree. So it was UPenn and Cornell. So there was a couple of different reasons why I decided to go with Cornell and apply to Cornell originally. The first is definitely the location. I love New York. I've always wanted to go to school in New York, and the fact that Cornell is in the state of New York was a huge draw to me. And it was going to be either one of the coasts, either like the East Coast or the West Coast. So that was something that really appealed to me. And also the campus is incredibly gorgeous. It looks amazing. Additionally, the size, Cornell is a really big school, and I wanted the opportunity to be in a school with a lot of people that I could meet and probably share the same interests as me, which is something that I really value. But also the fact that the undergraduate business degree, which is Dyson, is really small within that school. So I could network with my peers and have a kind of a better relationship with my professors alongside being in that big community. So Dyson has about 300 freshmen each year, whereas UPenn has maybe double or triple the size of that. So it was something that really appealed to me that way as well. And finally, the reason I chose Cornell was the fit, as I felt that my background was a much clearer fit at Cornell rather than any other school. And the fact that Dyson is so interdisciplinary and would allow me to pretty much study whatever I wanted while not being put into that business degree box was really important to me. And also, allegedly, it's more collaborative, but we'll see about that. The website sometimes lies, but that was kind of my thought process through it all.
All right, that's amazing. I'm surprised you chose one school and actually got in. That's actually very insane. You go. Okay. Heather, which schools did you apply for, and which one did you end up picking and why?
I ended up applying to 12 schools total, and I think the majority of them were concentrated on like the West Coast, specifically California, with the exception of like a couple in like the Midwest area. I applied to a couple of UCs. I applied to USC. I applied to Rice, Northwestern, my like state flagship, so OU, a couple other schools, and I ended up getting into half of them, but I think the two that I came down to were Rice and USC. And as for why I ended up choosing USC, I think it was mainly location. I think LA, just like the resources, opportunities, and just like all the new things that you can try in LA, I don't think I would have been able to do that or like to the same extent in Houston. And I think one thing that was in common with the majority of the schools that I ended up choosing to apply to was just interdisciplinarity and like freedom and being able to choose undergraduate courses. Those were the main reasons for me.
Those are definitely important. And whole school sounds like a lot of essays. All right, let's move on to Derek.
Thank you. So first off, I'm just gonna go list out all the schools that I applied to. So I also applied Cornell early decision, but the other schools I chose were Texas A&M, UT, and both of those were because I'm in-state. I go to a Texas school. So it would have been like the most logical choice to apply to those. And then I also applied to USC, Northeastern, and Case Western. So those schools were mainly because they had great school communities and just really great environments. And I could just see myself attending them. And then now like the main question, why did I apply to Cornell early decision? So I think that Cornell has a great College of Engineering. They have a very forward-thinking philosophy, and you can't trust everything the internet says, but from like the videos I've watched and also most of the things I've read online, the community is pretty collaborative there, even though it's very competitive. So that's one of the big reasons I chose Cornell.
Those are all amazing reasons to pick schools, and I think a lot of people will definitely take those into consideration when they choose schools. All right, for the next question, what are you guys planning to major in, and when did you start having an idea of a career path or a specific career path you wanted to go down, and why were you interested in it? Let's start again with Grace.
All right, so my current intended major is applied economics and management, also known as business. And I definitely had a pretty solid understanding that I was going to go down this path around my sophomore year of high school, mainly because I was really heavily involved in DECA, which is essentially a business and marketing career tech student organization with approximately 250,000 members internationally. And I could definitely go on and on about DECA, but I'll save you all kind of the time and your ears. So being that involved in that organization, specifically through competition as well as state leadership, I definitely thought that this is going to make my application look really good. This is now going to be my future career path. And because I was doing well in that organization, I decided to continue doing it. And I definitely really enjoy how business works. Well, maybe not all aspects of business, but in general, the major is something that interests me. And I feel like I could gain a lot of it and also have a steady career later in life.
it sounds like a lot of things we sign up for in high school are really important for college apps. So let's go ahead and ask Heather the same question.
My experience choosing a major was definitely not as straightforward as Grace's, because I know Grace did business, like extracurriculars, and is pursuing a business major. My major, cognitive science, is more interdisciplinary. And I would say I kind of bounced around with several interests in high school, and majority of it was focused towards science for a really long time. So say maybe like sophomore and junior year, I thought I'd go into college as like a bio major or something along the lines of that. And after after exploring several extracurricular experiences, like I competed in Science Olympiad, I did a lot of like biology focused events. I did a research internship at a lab for biology and other stuff like that. I realized I had some aspects of it I liked, but then there were other things I liked outside of school. And I think cognitive science combines those interests well and allows me to explore those in addition to other things that I may like. So that's how that turned out for me.
It definitely also sounds like a lot of work, but it definitely seems like it's been worth it. Let's go ahead and ask Derek the same question.
Thank you. So currently I am planning on majoring in mechanical engineering or computer science, but funny story is I used to really hate STEM or science, technology, engineering, math. So back in freshman year, I went at a research program at a nearby college. And then I just totally hated what I was doing. And I just wanted to go home every day. But I tried other stuff like business, and that was also amazing. But then what really changed my mind, and when I decided to major in like engineering just generally, is when I took physics C in junior year. And I thought it was like the most challenging but still enjoyable class. And I think just for everyone out there, like when you find a class that you enjoy taking but also still challenges you, it's something that you should look into. And that's probably one of the reasons that I wanted to major in engineering.
Yeah, and those are all amazing majors, and I wish you guys all the best luck. All right, time for the next questions. When did you start the college application processes? Grace?
All right, so I started my college application process relatively late compared to most people, which I 100% do not recommend. It was a very terrible time in my life, but I started around probably the beginning of my senior year, or that's when I started thinking about who I was going to ask for my recommendation letters. And so basically around mid-September, yeah, I started asking for those letters, and I started working on my actual application around mid-October, which the deadline was November 1st. So the time crunch on that was definitely a bit unfortunate, but yeah, I do not recommend it. Yeah, do not do what I did. Please listen to the other people on this one.
I think you made it out all right. So let's move on to Heather.
Going off of, I guess we're starting with like when we asked for recommendation letters. I initially asked my teachers at the end of my junior year, so maybe in like May-ish. But as for actual essays and like work on the Common App and stuff, I was like thinking about essay topics in say like August, but I don't think I like seriously started writing stuff until maybe around September. And then like Grace, I also had early decision deadlines on November 1st. So I just like worked continuously from that point in time up to the deadline.
That's amazing. And then we'll move on to Derek.
So with the letters of recommendation, I asked for them over the summer, and probably a good time to do it if you're a junior right now. It's definitely, if you haven't done it, do it right now. But yeah, letters of recommendation, make sure you do those quick, because a lot of teachers get a lot of them, so they need a lot of time to write them. But in terms of essay writing, I started those in around mid-September, and my ED deadline was November 1st. I had to apply to, I think, 5 other schools. And that was also a very stressful time, I didn't think it would have been that bad because, you know, like essay writing usually doesn't take that much time, but you have to edit a lot of essays and like just rewrite them, and adding on to like all your senior activities, it's going to be a stressful time, or you're not going to have time at all. So make sure you start those early, as everyone else said so far.
I think those are great reminders, especially for our upcoming seniors and me as well. So, who did you ask first for recommendation letters, or just who did you ask in general? And we'll start again with Grace.
Yeah, for sure. So I had to get 3 recommendation letters. The first I got from my AP capstone teacher, who I had for 2 years, and I also kind of built a rapport with, since she was involved in debate, and she was also the teacher who oversaw my thesis paper that I wrote senior year. She had also previously written my national merits letter of recommendation, so I knew I could kind of count on her to write me a good one, and she already had that pre-made template. So I kind of primed her with the national merit one and then threw her into the pit. I also asked my AP environmental science teacher, who I had only known for about a month at that point, but she was so nice. She was one of my favorite teachers, and we also shared a lot of common interests besides like academics. So that also helped a lot when she was writing mine. My final recommendation letter I had to get from my counselor, and it wasn't actually very personal because I pretty much did not know I had to get one from her until a week before the deadline. So I emailed her frantically saying, could you please write me this? And she agreed. And all in all, I didn't even meet with her once my senior year. So that probably didn't really impact my chances that much in a positive direction.
That sounds great. We'll move on to Heather.
All in all, I requested a total of 4 recommendation letters. One, like Grace, was the counselor. I believe we have the same counselor, and although I did meet with her pretty frequently throughout the school year, like I don't know how personal that recommendation letter was. I never read it as you do for most college recommendation letters. So again, I don't know how much of a role it actually played in my admission process. As for the other 3, the first I asked for my AP biology teacher, who at the time helped me obtain that research internship over the summer. And at that time, my prime academic interest was biology. So it was kind of just like she's the teacher of my favorite subject, and she also helped me get this opportunity. And then after that, I asked my AP English language teacher. And the way I approached it was that, like, in this class, I think I was very like social. I was very like involved in class discussions. And I think that showcased like a different side of the student I was. So in AP Bio, I was like a really studious kind of student. And in English, I was like vocal, and I like interacted with other students and whatnot like that. And then for the last one, I asked my Science Olympiad coach. Science Olympiad was my main extracurricular. I listed it as first on my Common App. So I think that was kind of just a logical thing. I asked my Science Olympiad coach. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So we'll go ahead and move on to Derek.
So I submitted 3 letters of recommendation, and I also tried to have my own like little strategy when I was choosing them. So for my first letter of recommendation, I chose my AP Lit teacher, and I took AP Lit junior year, by the way. So all my teachers I knew from junior year, and in her class, I was very academically focused. I participated in some class discussions, but really what I feel like made me stand out was that after class and outside of class, I would kind of talk to her. And even if it was small talk, we still talked about things related to like literature. Like we both shared a love for Russian literature, actually. And she wrote me a letter of recommendation to a Russian language program for the summer. So I forgot who said this before, but it kind of primed her to write me another letter of recommendation for college applications. And the next recommender was my AP Physics C teacher. So I was the only junior in the class out of all of the seniors. and I skipped physics 1. So I met with him a lot to kind of like learn the basics. And especially near the end of the year when all the seniors were checking out, I was kind of the person up front, just like sitting right in front of his face, arguing with him over like physics problems and asking like, why is this right? And I think that made him like consider me to be one of his like smart students, even though I wasn't particularly gifted in physics. So that was another way that I tried to interact with teachers. But just make sure don't like artificially try to interact with your teachers in a way. Just try to be yourself. And if you want to show different faces, you can. Or else they're going to be able to tell if you're like purposefully trying to do something artificial, And for my last letter of recommendation, I asked it from my professor from a research program I did the summer of senior year. So going into senior year, I worked in his lab, and that was my main extracurricular. I listed it number 1 on my Common App, and that was probably something I put a lot of time into, and I think he generally liked me. So those were my 3.
Sounds like it's a good idea to build a strong bond with your teachers. So we're going to go ahead and move on to a question that's asked a lot. So in you guys' opinion, when do you think is the best time to take the ACT/SAT? And how did you study for those tests? And do you have any tips on how to get a high score? Grace?
Okay, so I'm definitely in the camp of just take your SAT your junior year, either the summer before or after, or just during the year. I don't think you need to do it any earlier unless you're a child prodigy genius that wants to get it out of the way. Overall, the SAT itself is not a very difficult test if you are like learning things throughout your academic career. You just kind of need to polish yourself on how to take that test in particular. For me, I didn't actually have an extremely high score, and I didn't study heavily for any of my attempts either, beyond just looking at basic grammar rules. So I can't really say much on that in that aspect, but I do want to say that I think standardized tests are a useful tool for admissions, especially if you're a STEM major. But if you spend too much time preparing for your standardized tests, you're probably going to neglect other parts of your application or other parts of your life that could probably benefit you a lot more. So if you're not a STEM major or somebody who's extremely like diligent with their studies and wants to get that 1600, I don't think that you need to waste an entire summer or more trying to focus on studying for that test, because in actuality, you could probably take maybe a month out of your life and get it down, especially if you're a good test taker. If you're not a good test taker, this will probably vary from person to person. But just know that even if you have a bad SAT score or just like not a 1500 or above, your life is not ruined. It's going to be okay.
Those are some really useful tips. Heather?
I definitely agree with Grace. Like, I think the SAT is kind of just like a take until you get a score you're satisfied with, and then just leave it at that. So like sometime during your junior year, if you've taken practice ACT or SAT scores and gotten good scores like before that time, then you can take it. But I recommend just taking it, get a good score or a score that you're satisfied with it, and just end it at that. And then adding on to what Grace said about standardized testing in relation to college admissions, from what I understand or just what I've seen, standardized testing is really just you just have to meet the threshold. So if you already got a high score, but it's not like say a 1600, it's really not worth it spending all that time trying to get a perfect score, because as soon as you get above that threshold for college admissions, your standardized testing score will really not impact your admission at all. And as for how to study for those tests and any tips on how to get a high score, for me, the score that I sent in my test scores to the schools that I applied to, and the score that I sent in was the one I took, I believe, March of my junior year. And how I studied for that, I think I just did practice tests and a lot of practice problems from the 2 months leading up to it. I didn't work particularly hard over the summers beforehand or anything. And yeah, again, how to get a high score, just take a lot of practice tests, review your wrong answers and whatnot. And I did see some questions in the chat. How do you decide between the ACT or SAT? So personally, I only took the SAT. I have never taken the ACT. And both exams are like, they have some similarities, but there also are some differences. So I would just say look them up online and figure out what they are. For me, I knew that ACT was like a really time-based exam. Like you have to work through the problems pretty quickly. And I knew that probably was not going to be good for me. So I didn't take the ACT at all. And do you recommend taking the SAT in order to be placed? You actually do have to send in an SAT score for the final standing for national merit. So yeah, you have to take the PSAT in your junior year for national merit to like even qualify. And then if you make it to semifinalists, then you have to send in your SAT score for them to like just check and make sure that you're qualified for it. But yeah.
Again, great tips. Derek?
All right, so personally, I took the SAT in September of my junior year, and the ways that I studied for it was through a local test prep, and honestly, that did not work too well for me. I didn't feel like I was improving, so I kind of just, I took a leave from there, and then I just went through all the problems on Khan Academy. And from what my friends have told me and like everyone around me, Khan Academy is like, it's absolutely wonderful because first off, it's free. And second off, it really prepares you for the SAT reading portion. And before I went to Khan Academy, I feel like I wasn't placing too high on the SAT reading section, but then I did every question they offered, which isn't too many, but it's a pretty sizable amount. I would recommend everyone go check it out. And I did very well on my reading section, but then I didn't do too well on my math section. So make sure that you balance both sections. And also for the ACT versus SAT question, what I would recommend is just take practice tests for both of them, and you'll know like inside, you'll know which one is easier for you. And you can also look at your score. So that's my recommendation for that.
That's great. Hopefully this helps those who are nervous for this test and those who are about to take it. For our next question, how do you write a good college application essay? And do you have any tips for us, Grace?
Yeah, so again, I'm probably an outlier in this question because I only wrote 2 college essays during my application process. So please take all of my advice with a grain of salt, since I have it's all based on research and pretty limited experience. But for me, the main rules I kind of tried to follow were, first, try to make it entertaining, as admissions officers are reading thousands of these essays in the span of a couple months. So if you really don't want to be put to the bottom of the pile, you should probably make it more easy to read and better for your admissions officers to enjoy. Also, don't just rehash a part of your resume word for word, but you can expand on different extracurriculars and things you couldn't in that tiny activities portion of the Common App. I think you only had maybe 150 characters to write everything about your activities. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it definitely wasn't enough to expand on some of the work that I did personally. So for one of my essays, I wrote about DECA and some stuff that I did in my community that actually made an impact through my personal work. And my other essay was about how I overcame some personal difficulties with communication and how it helped me grow as a person. My final tip is to ask your friends to read your essays, as I definitely forced Heather to read my supplement like 15 minutes before the due date because I needed someone to proofread it. But like having your friends read your essay and give you advice on it is probably the most beneficial thing that you can do for yourself, because if you don't do that, you're only going to have your own opinion and your own eyes looking at your essay. But also feel free to reach out to people that you know that are already in college. I asked one of my old friends who goes to MIT now to read my essay, and she hammered me. She was so very great at taking out all the little details of my essay that I had no idea, but that was another amazing thing that helped me kind of proofread my essay and make sure it was good before I sent it in.
That makes a lot of sense. We'll go on to Heather.
I would say how to write a good college application essay. You hear it all the time, but it really is true. You need to be authentic to yourself and you need to write personally. Like make sure you're not fabricating or like writing anything artificial. Like you're writing something that genuinely happened or something that you genuinely feel. And expanding on what Grace said about like not just like taking parts of your resume and then just dumping it into your essay. One thing that's really important is not just like putting that in there, but also like talking more about it. How did this experience like change you as a person? How did it like motivate you to pursue like this particular academic interest, yada, yada, yada. In general, I think that goes for all college application essays. You need to like expand every single thing. So whenever you're writing, just ask yourself questions like, why do I like this? Why do I want to continue doing this? How did this change me as a person? All of those like really hard, difficult questions, you're going to be asking yourself those all the time when you're writing your essays. And again, don't be afraid to reach out to people. I also reached out to my friends later, I think in regular decision to read my essays. And I also asked that same person who goes to MIT now to read those essays. She definitely also hammered in on my my first draft. And it may be a little bit embarrassing to have other people, maybe even your friends to read it, but it is definitely something that needs to be done because sometimes you just need other eyes, maybe those eyes that have already graduated and moved on to college to read those essays and like tell you their experiences and like their input.
Peer reviews definitely important. Derek?
So I'm going to follow Heather on this and say the number one most important thing when writing college applications is to write about something authentic. So like another thing about college applications is that you want to make it unique and entertaining. And everyone's lives are unique and entertaining. And if you don't feel that way, you just haven't thought deep enough because everyone has their like little intricacies and the stories. And that's what a lot of college admissions officers anecdotally want to read, because just think about it this way. If they're reading like essay after essay about how someone's injury in a sport changed them as a person, they're going to be sick when someone else writes that. But if you're going to write about a specific story that you had that was like, for example, like a very unique hobby that you had, that's personally what I wrote about. Something that I didn't have on the rest of my extracurriculars, just something that, you know, is unusual from the common college applicant, and something that, you know, the admissions officer can tell someone else, like, oh, I read this essay about some kid who did this or did that. So that's how I see it. And also when sharing with other people, make sure you don't share it with people on the internet, because people tend to not be so honest when they're on the internet. And I've known about people's essays being stolen, so don't do that. But when it comes to trusted friends, your family, maybe some teachers or counselors, I would definitely recommend you reach out to them.
This is all amazing advice. So for our next question, do you still remember your college interviews? If so, which colleges gave you an interview and who were your interviewers and what did you talk about in these interviews? Grace?
I did not have any interviews, so I'm going to pass on this question.
All right, we'll move on to Heather.
I had 3 interviews total. The first was from my restricted early action school, which was Yale. The second was Rice, and the third was the USC merit interview, which operates a little bit differently from the others. But as for who gave me an interview and what did you talk about in those interviews, again, with the exception of the USC one, all of them were alumni interviews. So like the school would just reach out to people who had already graduated and then ask those people to interview applicants. And what did I talk about? It's just like general interview questions. They always start off with, tell me about yourself. It's really general, but it's a good idea to prepare an answer to that. And then other really general questions like, why us? Why this school? Why this major? And like other just questions about your application. So maybe your extracurriculars. None of my interviewers asked about like specific things in my essays, but I know people have done that before, just things like that. But I think one thing to remember about college interviews is that they're like really casual. Don't just make sure to answer all of the questions like truthfully. And yeah, that's about it. And the USC interview, I don't really have anything specific to say about that. It was definitely like a little bit less casual, but that's because they're interviewing specifically for scholarships, no longer for admission to the school. But it was still about the same questions. So just making sure that you have answers to the general questions like that. You can find like lists of them online to prepare for beforehand. But other than that, it's like a pretty like easygoing process. And at the end of the day, what happens in interviews don't play that much of a role in your admissions process. It's just more so that the admissions officers can get to know you as a person, because again, they're reading like thousands of applicants like applications. And even if you do expand a lot about yourself on your essays, being able to have that face-to-face contact, whether in person or on Zoom, I guess, will help your interviewers and admissions officers see more as a person and not just like text on a piece of paper.
Awesome. Let's move on to Derek.
So I have very limited experience with college interviews because I only did one unofficial alumni interview with Cornell University. And by the way, if you're applying to Cornell, they do offer unofficial interviews. They don't count technically towards your application, but my interviewer was the head of the Dallas Alumni Board, and they were very, very casual when speaking to me. So the first question they asked me was, I thought you were applying as a pre-med major, because my top activity was a health-related activity. But generally when they're talking to you, you just want to be yourself and try not to be too robotic when you're doing that. And another useful piece of advice is, personally, the Cornell alumni interviewer, they told me that they had like some pages to write and they could attach it to my Cornell application. So I think that did help me, because they told me that they would write something nice about me, which they hopefully did. So make sure that when you're even doing like an unofficial interview, you still want to be the best of yourself, and just don't do anything too stupid and stay very authentic to yourself.
That's great. And for this next question, how did your parents support you during your application process?
Yeah, so I think that the greatest way my parents personally supported me through the application process was by not doing anything at all. And I mean that in the best way possible, as they just trusted that I could do it and do it on my own. So whatever activities that I wanted to pursue, they never told me I couldn't do them. They gave me the time and resources to basically do whatever I wanted in high school. And they, so I just did whatever I wanted. And but I'm definitely immensely grateful that they didn't try to helicopter me all the time, and they did give me that freedom. And in fact, I didn't even tell them what schools I was applying to or what day decisions came out. So on the day that Cornell decisions came out, I basically surprised them by saying, here's where I'm going for the next 4 years. And they had no clue whatsoever. Another good way that my parents tried to support me through the process was that they basically assured me that no matter what school that I got into, they would try and financially support me all 4 years. So one of the things that was a really big relief to me was that no matter where I got in, I could probably go, most likely. So that was something in the back of my mind that really helped. So no matter what school I got in, if I got admitted, I could go.
Definitely a great surprise. Heather?
Like Grace, I think my parents gave me a lot of freedom when it came to like just my extracurriculars, even before the application process, but also during the application process. Like I wrote most of my essays and did most of the Common App by myself, in addition to help with like friends and like maybe teachers. But one way that my parents really helped me during the application process was creating that college list. So while I was working on like maybe like my Common App essay, which is just a general essay that goes to pretty much every college that you'll apply to, they helped me like research schools, location size, like things like that. And I think that helped me figure out which schools I wanted to apply to. Because I think one thing students think about a lot whenever they're doing their college application process is like the essay and extracurriculars and whatnot. But I think people underestimate the time it takes to build a college list that actually suits you. So that's one way that my parents really helped me.
That sounds very helpful. Derek?
So I'm gonna actually have to take an opposite stance to Grace. I think how my parents best supported me was always like constantly reminding me, because personally speaking, and I know this is true because I am myself, but I'm a huge procrastinator. So when it comes to college applications, I thought I would not procrastinate, but I did end up procrastinating. So what my parents did was they did constantly remind me, even if it was very annoying, it did honestly help me a lot, but they constantly reminded me about deadlines and also to write my essays. So I like to thank my parents for doing that. And also just like generally, parents are very supportive when it comes to other stuff. Like I didn't have my car at the time, so they did drive me like to all my activities, so I wouldn't have to worry about getting rides or anything. So I do think that they were very helpful in those two ways.
All of your answers sound like they'll help all the parents worried about their children going into college later. And final question for chapter 1. What do you think really helped you get into the college you wanted? And of course, below it says academics, standardized tests, athletics, etc. Grace?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. And I definitely think that the reason that I got into Cornell, and again, I am not my admissions officer. Please take everything with a grain of salt. I'm pretty sure none of us really know why we got in, but this is my best guess, at least in this sense. So I think my extracurriculars gave me that fit to get into Cornell, specifically being a part of DECA and my involvement in leadership. Because I was the state vice president my junior year for Oklahoma DECA and then the state president for my senior year, along with placing internationally in my event within DECA, which is food marketing, that kind of gave me an edge in comparison to a lot of other students who may have not had that experience on the state level, instead of like just having leadership activities within my school. I tried to branch out into external organizations. I also did Science Olympiad, although very much less than Heather. I was very briefly involved for the first 3 years of my high school career. And I also did debate, as well as a lot of other politically related extracurriculars. So that definitely really framed me as somebody who was interested in the more interdisciplinary side of business, because I wasn't just doing business related activities over the summer. I didn't do a startup. I didn't have that internship experience at JP Morgan, but I did a lot of other stuff that was really interdisciplinary. And additionally, because the Dyson College within Cornell's motto is "Our business is a better world," the political side of my application, alongside like the very brief science stuff that I did with DECA, also made it really obvious that I was also interested in building a quote unquote better world through business. My stats were definitely pretty standard compared to everyone else who was kind of on the same level. I took as many APs as I could handle, which kind of worked out. And I did have all A's by the time my application was submitted. So again, kind of, it's not really something that made me stood out, but it's like Heather mentioned earlier with the testing, it's kind of a prerequisite or like a threshold that you have to meet before you're even considered. So I don't think that was something that really stood out. Yeah, so basically the main point is that a lot of the leadership that I did really helped allow me to get into that school, because Cornell's also, at least Cornell's business program is really interested in leadership. So after I applied, they also offered me a kind of a scholarship, or the Meinig Family Scholars Program, which basically takes 100 of the incoming freshmen who were really involved in leadership and gives them like a little bit of a stipend and also a 4-year kind of mentorship program. So seeing that I received that, I'm pretty sure that leadership and being a part of a lot of leadership organizations or a lot of leadership activities definitely helped. And regards to how many APs I took by the end of my junior year, I took 1 my freshman year, 3 my sophomore year, and then 5 my junior year. So that's 9. No. Yes. Yes. That is 9. As you can see, I'm not a STEM major.
Sounds like a really strong background to me. Heather?
When it came to the schools that I got accepted to, I definitely think my essays were the ones that gave me an edge. Because when it came to like standardized tests or extracurricular activities, I definitely think my application in that aspect was like maybe above average, but not enough to like give me an edge or really surprise admissions officers. And as for my extracurriculars, they were also like, I think it was mainly like I had my STEM extracurriculars, and then I had like my political/activism extracurriculars. And I will say in my essays, I made sure to like, at least in like the major related essay topics, I made sure to do my best to tie into how these different experiences motivated me to pursue this kind of major. So even though like I didn't really have a straightforward path with extracurriculars, essays, and then like my actual admission, I just made sure to connect all of them in my essays. And expanding on that, one thing I did with my essays is like I made sure to always have like an interesting topic. One thing I did when I was writing my essays is that I always like made a metaphor to something else. So even if I was talking about like a basic topic like my extracurriculars, I always like made it interesting so that like so that the admissions officers, when they read it again, it'll stand out to them and it won't just like blend in with the other thousands of essays.
That also sounds like a really strong background. Derek?
In my opinion, I'm a pretty well-rounded applicant, and I don't know exactly what got me in, but I think I can narrow it down to 2 different things. So first off, with my extracurriculars, my primary extracurricular was it was a research program, and in my local area, it's very competitive. I think it's around a 5% acceptance rate across all schools. So generally speaking, the research program had a good track record of sending kids to those top 20 schools. So in my opinion, that was probably my primary extracurricular that got me in. And also in terms of athletics, I compete for my school's hockey team, and I played at the varsity level since sophomore year, and we won state championships 3 years in a row, and we also competed at the USA Nationals quarterfinals level. So yeah, that's a mouthful to say, but basically, athletically speaking, I was also pretty high up, but I was not good enough to be recruited by Cornell, unfortunately, because they have a very strong hockey program. But generally speaking, I feel like it kind of made me a unique applicant because you don't have too many STEM majors who are also playing hockey. So that's just my opinion. I don't know exactly what my admission officer was thinking, but generally it was those 2 activities.
And those are all sounding very strong backgrounds you guys all have. All right, so let's move on to chapter 2, which is high school life. And what is something that you wish you had known at the start of your high school? Grace?
Okay, so my biggest piece of advice is that when you look at an opportunity, some opportunities are actually time sucks in disguise. So choose what you participate in very wisely. If you think it's not going to benefit you and you don't enjoy it, quit, like leave immediately. It's not worth your time. And I've definitely heard from my other friends that they would sometimes spend their summers doing maybe 10 internships at a time, and they didn't get a chance to put any of them on their college application. So maybe when you look at what you're spending your time on, try and pick out what really matters to you. But also kind of on the flip side of that, don't be afraid to join things that don't necessarily seem like things that would look really good on your college application. So you can do frivolous activities. You can join a club that you're just very tangentially interested in. You don't have to focus everything around your major. In fact, it actually makes you seem like a more human applicant if you do things beyond just what you think your college wants you to. And also my second piece of advice is that getting a B is not the end of the world. When I went into high school, even the thought of getting a B in any of my classes literally made my head explode. But by the time I reached the end of my junior year, I was very happy with settling with whatever I could get in my AP calculus class. So overall, if you are not a STEM major, if you are not good at math or science, you are fine. I think a lot of people in our community really emphasize that STEM is the way to go, especially from a really young age. I was pushed into a lot of STEM related activities, even though I was probably the worst person you can think of to do a simple math problem. So yeah, getting bad grades is okay if you do it very sparingly and on things that are non-related to your major. Again, I'm not encouraging you all to go get bad grades, but I'm saying that based on my experience, B's are fine.
I think that's super helpful to hear. Heather?
I think I have two main things I wish I had known at the start of my high school. The first off is just like, I think all of us have heard about like things that might look good on your resume, and to some extent, like I think we've all done something at some point that was mainly, if not entirely, just to put on your resume. And I will say that like, while some of those like maybe actual good experiences, whenever you're writing your essays, which again, what I think shown the most in my application, it's hard to write passionately about something that you weren't passionate about. So again, do something that is related to your major, like maybe work on stuff that is related to your major, but don't push yourself to do anything that you know you would not enjoy just because you think it'll look good, because admissions officers can see like straight through you when you write your essay. If you're not passionate about something and you're just writing in it because you think it'll look good on your application or on your essay, they will see it and it will not be good. And then the other thing, kind of just speaking generally about what Grace said about how bad or like maybe a B is not the end of the world. I think a lot of people going into high school are expected to keep up with everything perfectly. When it comes to college admissions, like just specifically college admissions, the people that get into top schools, they don't always have like the most perfect SAT scores, absolutely like out of this world extracurriculars and whatnot. Just make sure you do what you enjoy and push yourself in those areas, and it'll show through no matter what you do when it comes time for college admissions.
Very useful information. Derek?
So I also have two things. First off, never stop doing what you enjoy doing. So this is a great way to explore what you want to do in college. So if everyone is telling you to, become a doctor or do a CS major, try not to let that impact all activities that you do. So don't stop doing a hobby just because everyone is telling you that, you're gonna earn a lot more money when you're, a software engineer at Google or something. But if it's not going to make you happy and you're not going to enjoy it when you're doing it in college, then why do it at all, right? So if you have like a passion for history, just keep doing history. You can still, take your CS classes, but if you enjoy doing history, then why not just keep doing it? And if you still like it when you're applying to college at senior year, you could consider doing a history major or maybe like a minor in history. But the overall thing is, don't stop doing what you're passionate about. You can also write about this in your essays if you're looking at it that way, but just generally do what makes you happy. Number 2 is do your best, and oftentimes opportunities will come and find you. So it's not you always pursuing things. Just do what you enjoy. Like I said, do it very well, and oftentimes you're going to find yourself at the doorstep of some really great opportunities. For example, the research program that I was talking about, I had no idea existed until my physics teacher told me. And the reason he referred it to me is because he thought that I was good enough to participate in it. And at that point, I was just doing physics because I thought it was pretty fun. But as I said, just do what you love and the opportunities will find you.
All super good advice. Now the next question, between all of that, how did you balance your time between academics, extracurriculars, and other social activities? We'll start with Grace.
With all of that, I definitely balanced my time very poorly, but I didn't get a lot of sleep between having a job, doing my extracurriculars, my personal interests, as well as classes. And I definitely strongly encourage you all not to do that. I think I did have a manageable schedule, but my time management skills were so poor that I ended up not getting a lot of sleep between my junior and senior year. So yeah, making up that sleep deprivation was definitely, I could probably put that as another extracurricular. Like that was how much I slept every single day. And Heather, you can probably note of instances where I slept in places where I'm not supposed to sleep, but that is a-okay because I ended up doing it anyways.
Hopefully you got some good sleep now. We'll move on to Heather.
The biggest time consumer out of academics that I can think of was probably swimming. It was at a really inconvenient time of the day, at least before I started high school. And even after I started high school, it's you have that time in the afternoon and the evening. And then I always had swim practice right in the middle. So I had a little bit of time beforehand, I had some time afterwards, but I never just had a huge time block. So for me, when it came to being able to do my homework and work on extracurriculars and do swimming later in the day, I think the best thing for me is just finding those time spots during the day that you can work on your homework early. So instead of waiting until the evening to do your homework, if you have free time in your class, or maybe lunch, if you're not doing anything at that moment, just work on your homework. And it may suck to sit in class and have free time and not being able to do other things, but you'll be happy when you have free time in the evenings to work on things that are not just homework.
Good tips. Good tips. Derek?
So there is a very famous saying, you can choose 2 of these 3 options: grades, sleep, and friends. And for me, I gave up 2 of them and I just chose grades, which isn't a good example of balance because you still want to have a social life and you still want to have sleep. So when I gave up both of them, I wasn't too happy. I was very stressed, and I wouldn't recommend going for a imbalance particularly. But as the speakers before me said, you still want to make sure that you have your priorities straight. Keep your health as your number 1 priority, because if you're not sleeping well, you're not going to do good in anything else. And all right, I'm going to go into some of the details of balancing time, but you still want to have your priorities, right? You have to get your number 1 pick of your extracurricular or your academics or some particular activity that you enjoy. For me, I put my number 1 as my grades, and I ensured that I kept all A's throughout high school, even at the expense of everything else, as I referenced in my beginning. But my number two was, of course, my extracurriculars. And then between all your extracurriculars, you still have to rank them. Just like mentally, you're still gonna have to rank them so you know how much time you want to dedicate. And if there's a conflict, are you gonna go to event A or are you gonna go to event B? So it's just all about prioritization. And as I said, and everyone else mentioned, make sure that you balance your time between academics, extracurriculars, social activities, and also your sleep. Sleep is most important though.
Sounds important to know your priorities. All right, next question. Do you have any plans on what you want to do after college? Grace?
So all of this is definitely in the nebulous future. So everything is up in the air, but my current career path of choice is, I hope, like straight out of college, I can be able to work in a business strategy or a similar role in either a consulting firm or hold some sort of position in nonprofit or startup that I'm interested in. Or if all else fails, I will go to grad school. Grad school is always an option.
I think grad school is an honorable option. All right, Heather?
Again, like what you're doing after college is really far away for all of us. As for what I want to do, I am currently pursuing a cognitive science major, and I'm interested in pursuing some sort of like computer science or like user experience minor. So maybe applying those things towards some sort of tech role. But again, all of those are up in the air. You get to try a lot of new things in college, and who knows where that'll go. So it's all up in the air, really.
Makes a lot of sense. Derek?
Personally, I would want to participate in a startup or a very early stage company. The reason being is that I really enjoy innovation and also just like the speed of things. I personally think I work well under stress, and it's one thing that I enjoy doing actually. And so logically, I would enjoy being in a startup, and that's just my personal choice. I know a lot of my friends are planning on going to big engineering firms or going to, software engineering companies, but it's just something that I've always wanted to do, and I plan on doing that.
It was those are all great aspirations, and it was good to know all three of our speakers. So let's end it off with our last question before we go into the Q&A. I already see some things in the chat, and we'll go over that after we answer this last question. So what motivates you guys to work hard towards your goals? Grace?
Yeah, for sure. For me, probably my main source of motivation is basically proving that I can do it. I was the type of person in middle school that would kind of lean into the fact like, oh, making a joke, like self-deprecation and being like, I'm not really sure, I'm kind of stupid. But in actuality, I'm not stupid. And that's what I wanted to show everyone. I think not being very good at STEM, I get a bit of flack from people in that kind of STEM bubble. It's like, you're not doing the work on your own, or you are not capable of doing things. And I just wanted to kind of be like, I am capable. Ta-da! Yeah, also kind of the motivation to have a stable career after college and be able to support myself financially, and making sure that, because my parents are immigrants, and I'm sure a lot of you all are either first generation or people who have just immigrated to the United States to get a better life, not kind of foregoing that opportunity and ensuring that whatever opportunities that I was afforded during the early years of my life, I can continue that momentum forward.
That's awesome. Heather?
I think my approach for working hard towards my goals was just like finding what I was happy doing, and then just like mastering it. When it comes to subjects I like, my approach is like, I want to know as much of it as I can. I want to like really be proficient and like kind of be like a master in understanding this topic. So when it comes to academic subjects, I think that's what pushes me. And I will agree with Grace that a lot of us who are probably either first gen or second gen immigrants, also finding like stability motivates me to work hard.
That's also super cool. Derek?
This is a very complicated question, but personally speaking, what motivates me to work hard toward my goals is when there's something that I enjoy doing, I want to be the best in that field, whether it be in like my high school extracurriculars. I've always tried to be, like at the top. And when it comes to academics, I've always tried to be at the top. That's just my personal motivation. And as long as it motivates you, it's still valid motivation, because at the end of the day, it's kind of how it gets you there. It's not exactly what gets you there.
All of those are really respectable and honorable motivations. All right, so now we're going to move on to the Q&A, and I'm going to go ahead and scroll through the chat. Okay, so the first question I found was, are your counselors helpful? And you guys can just feel free to just popcorn and answer.
I guess I'll start on this one. So I personally found that my counselors were not that useful. I'm sure that people who maybe took advantage of the opportunity to speak to them more would have a different experience. But at least what I know of, and the times that I did actually talk to my counselor, first of all, the bureaucratic system to get to them was kind of a pain. Secondly, the fact that we live in Oklahoma, or I guess in Derek's case, Texas, it's probably way different. At least in my school, my counselor was very, they tried to push me in a different opposite direction. So when I asked my counselor about the colleges that I was applying to, they basically said that, you should maybe aim lower. I like not necessarily in that verbiage, but they told me that like there's not that much chance, or they didn't give me much hope, which I'm pretty sure that's what counselors are supposed to do, to lower your expectations. But that definitely was not a very positive experience for me. So yeah.
I can go next. So again, I had the same counselor as Grace, and I think your experience with your counselor, it just depends on what kind of person you get. So personally, our counselor that we had, I think she came to our school like maybe later in our high school year, so maybe sophomore or junior year. And I think she was definitely like new to just like our high school and the college admissions experience. So like I can go and ask her for help about like getting into my classes, writing recommendation letters and stuff. But when it came to advice, like Grace said, you just have to take it with a grain of salt. Like you can listen to what they hear, but like at the end of the day, if you do your research, you can pursue your own path. And again, as to whether counselors are helpful or not, I've heard experiences of like people being like really, really close with their counselors. They help them find like scholarship opportunities or programs. You just have to go and talk to your counselor and like see if they'll help you find opportunities or whatnot. It really varies.
Right.
So yeah, I can go next.
Okay, sweet.
But I'm very thankful that my school counselor was very helpful and experienced. So he was at my school, and my school is a private school, so this is probably a big factor in this, but he was at my school for approximately 7 years. And in that time, he's probably sent over 20 kids to Cornell. But one thing that he did help me about was, I used to be very risk averse, especially when it comes to something as big as a college application. But he was very, he embraced risk, and he thought that it would make me a more unique applicant. And to everyone out there, it really does. So I'll just give out one example of something unique that I wrote that was very risky. In my Cornell application, it asks you to write 3 adjectives to describe yourself. And this is just for the College of Engineering. But one of the adjectives that he convinced me to write was the word hungry, which is not typically something you would write in a college application, but we thought it would be funny, and I think it did help me to an extent.
Seems like it definitely depends on the person. Does anyone
I
have
don't
anything
think-
else to add?
Okay, I wanted to add one more thing. At my school, we have 4 counselors, and it's and like your counselor is assigned to you based off your last name. But whenever I went to my counselor for help, I kind of talked to all the counselors, and we definitely had some counselors who like were more knowledgeable and experienced with their job. So like honestly, if you're worried about your counselor not being helpful, you can talk to all of them really. Like I would talk to one, I would talk to mine, and if she didn't know the answer, then I would just like go around and ask all the other ones. So don't be afraid to do that if you need to.
Anyone else got anything to add? All right, I'll take that as a no. Okay, so the next question I found, did you and all of your classmates have the same subjects / classes at secondary schools, or were you able to pick the classes that you'll take? If you're able to pick, how did you decide which classes to take and what classes not to take?
I can go ahead and go first. I mean, you basically get freedom to pick whatever classes you want, but I'll say like to some extent, a lot of classes are assigned to like to like specific grades. So obviously you have like those requirements that you need to fulfill for graduation. But when it comes to other things like AP classes, I know for some it's like AP World, for example, that's pretty much an all software class. Or like AP English language, that's usually a junior class. I know Derek took lit in his junior year, at least for our school, that was basically the way to go about things. But you can really go about like taking any classes that you want to. And as for deciding which classes to take and which classes not to take, after like I'd picked basically the AP classes that a lot of students my grade were taking, it was really just like academic interest. So like in my sophomore year, I knew I really liked sciences. So I took AP Bio and AP Chem in the same year, when I think a lot of people might only take one science. And then in my junior year, I took physics and anatomy because I really liked the anatomical kind of side of science. Just play into your interests, pick classes that you like. And when it came to my senior year, I ended up doing concurrent at a local university. And for the classes I picked, it was definitely like a little bit out of line with what I had picked normally. But those were ones that I picked just purely out of interest, like out of curiosity, because I wanted to learn more about this topic. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'll kind of add on to Heather's experience as somebody who went to the same school. So definitely agree with Heather that pretty much every single grade has a predetermined AP or on-level course that you can take, but you have the opportunity to kind of skip up if you wanted to. I know Heather skipped Algebra 2. Yeah, Algebra 2, and a lot of kids decide to skip pre-algebra. I didn't go down this route. I pretty much stuck with the designated math progression throughout my entire year, couple years in high school. Additionally, what Heather said earlier about having those extra spots where you can take interesting courses, I took debates and DECA all 4 years of high school. And basically those were my 2 big extracurricular interests that I had a course on for my entire high school career. But yeah, I did also take chem and bio and physics in my sophomore year, like Heather, but that drove me in the complete opposite direction, where I realized that I hated science and basically never took a science class ever again until my senior year. So having the opportunity to choose classes that you might be interested in, as well as taking the classes that you are definitely not interested in and getting them out of the way earlier so that in your later years, when you have a lot of other responsibilities, you can have that free time or an easier course to take.
So I'll give my experiences next. But my school has a very rigid class structure. So we have our own like math, science progressions, and there was only 2 places where I really kind of did something different. First off, I skipped geometry because I took it in middle school, and then I took Algebra 2 freshman year, pre-cal sophomore year, calc BC junior year, and then for senior year, I actually did not go with multivariable as a lot of my friends went, but I went with AP Stats actually. And one of the reasons I did AP Stats was because my summer research project had a lot to do with statistics. So I wanted something a lot in depth with statistics. So that was just a personal preference. And the other kind of like deviation from the standard route I went with was, as I said, instead of taking physics 1, I was taking calculus BC at the same time. So I convinced my counselor to let me take AP Physics C, which includes mechanics as well as electricity and magnetism. So that was just my two like different paths that I went down. And that's really because I was a STEM major. I knew by junior year that I was going to do STEM, but I know other students who also took like a lot of different history courses, and our school also offers a lot of different like business seminars, which I did not take. But definitely throughout high school, there's a lot of options no matter what school you go to. And if you talk to the right people and show them that you can work hard enough, they'll definitely let you.
Yeah,
Great.
sorry, I'm gonna add on a little bit to what Derek said about the math progression. I also did the same math progression as he did, but I did take AB Calc instead of BC Calc. And if you're in the Norman Public School District, that is the standardized math path that you are offered if you are in the highest level math that they're offering for middle schoolers. So you don't have to worry about skipping anything if you want to take that route. And yeah, a lot of our counselors also do suggest you take physics alongside a calculus course, since a lot of the topics are related.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and move to the next question. How do you like art class at school?
I can go ahead and speak about this. There is like a fine arts requirement at our school, but fine arts includes like actual art classes, like band and orchestra. It also includes speech and debate. So if you're talking specifically about art class, I'm not sure if any three of us have ever taken an art class at our high school. So I don't know how much we can speak on that. I know Wendy does art, so I don't know if she would want to answer instead, but.
I mean, unless you guys have anything else to share, I mean. Well, I guess it really just depends on the school. If you want to pursue art, take those classes. All right, we'll move on to the next question. Okay, speaking on the college interviews, are those interviews online or in person?
Yes, I'll go again. All three of my interviews were online. Usually in normal, not COVID years, your interviews will probably be in person. Like you'll meet up with an alumni that came from your area and maybe go to like a coffee shop or a library. I don't know, because I never had an in-person interview. But yeah, all of mine were online. But this might change with the years to come. Like I think this year I had one of my interviewers asked if I wanted to meet up in person, but I ended up just saying, no, I'm okay with just a Zoom interview. So it might be hybrid. It might go completely back to in person in the coming years. We don't know.
So I'll add on. So for my Cornell alumni interview, it was over Zoom. And generally speaking, I know this is the case from my friends' anecdotes, but a lot of state schools or like local colleges, they tend to have in-person interviews, even like during COVID. They still, some of them still had in-person interviews because they had a lot of alumni nearby. But when it comes to colleges very far away, like for example, from the Northeast, for example, they might not, they'll probably continue to stay virtual even after the pandemic kind of recedes.
Okay. Okay, so this next question was answered before by Grace, but we can hear from the other two. How many APs did you take by the end of your junior year?
I think by the end of my junior year, I had taken 10 APs. I took 1 in freshman year, 5 in sophomore year, and then 4 in junior year, with one of them being online over Edgenuity. Yeah.
For me, it was none freshman year because our school would not allow us to take APs freshman year. I took 2 of them sophomore year, and then I took 6 of them junior year. And one of them was online.
Awesome. There's a question next for Heather. I'm not sure if she answered it because my memory, it flees me, but Heather, would you recommend someone to do swimming for 4 years in high school if the student won't be a competitive swimmer?
Yeah, okay. First off, I did not answer the question earlier. And for context, for people that might not know me as well, I swam for my school swim team throughout high school, and I had swam for a really long time beforehand. And for this question, it kind of depends what you mean competitive swimmer. If you mean competitive as in like fast enough that they could get recruited and it would like really shine on their resume, I don't really know. I think that just comes down to the person. Like for me, I did not get recruited for my swimming, obviously, but I still really enjoyed swimming a lot. And if I had to do high school again, even if like I didn't write about swimming, or if I didn't like get recruited for swimming or have any like super big like national or international titles, I would still do swimming again because it's something that I really love to do, and it's kind of just been a part of me. It just comes down to the specific person. Just think about whether this is something you want to dedicate a lot of time to, because I do know a lot of people in our community who also swim in Norman, and you just have to ask, and it does take a good chunk of time going to practices and meets and whatnot. So you just have to decide whether that's something you want to prioritize.
All right, next question. Can you guys talk about how you spent your summers in high school?
I can start on this one. So for the summer going into freshman year, I actually went to China, and this was definitely before COVID, but this did not have to do with anything related to college. But if you are the parent of someone coming into freshman year, you don't have to like have them do something college application related. Just let them have fun. I thought it was a fun time. And then when I was going to sophomore year, that summer I did a research camp at a local university. And that really opened my eyes to the field. And honestly, as I said before, I didn't really enjoy it. And then going into junior year, I went to a business program called LaunchX. I enjoyed it pretty well, and that's where I kind of like began wanting to go into the field of like startups or like early stage companies after I graduated. And then going into senior year, I attended a Russian language course, as well as doing another research program. So that's basically just my summers.
Okay, I guess I can go next. Also like Derek, in my summer after freshman year, I went to China. I also went to Japan, and I did not do anything like specific for my resume. That summer was also just like a have fun, spend time with your family kind of summer. So yeah, I didn't do anything then. And then the summer after my sophomore year, I originally had like the research internship lined up, like the one that I got through my biology teacher that summer. But because of COVID, like all of those in-person opportunities were just like canceled and pushed off for later. So that summer, I know Grace mentioned earlier in like her advice I would give to my younger self, figure out which activities are time sucks. I did definitely do a couple of like time sucking activities in that summer after sophomore year that I ended up not really caring about later, or like having no space to put it on my application. And then the summer after my junior year, I was definitely a lot more busy. That was a year that I did the research internship, so that took a lot of time. I volunteered at my local hospital, and then I also did tutoring for Share and Grow. So the organization hosting this right now.
All right, for me, my summers, the summer after my freshman year, I'm pretty sure I just stayed home and I studied for a proficiency test that I did not pass. Let me think. I also, yeah, I definitely spent that summer pursuing a lot of personal interests, like playing 8 hours of Minecraft every single day. Again, during after your freshman year, you should be okay in terms of resume building. After my sophomore year, the summer after my sophomore year at least, that was the year kind of COVID hit, but I was elected onto the state council for DECA. So we did a lot of training and kind of planning as well as meetings over the summer. So they made me do a lot of social media stuff, and we also did a training camp called Career Tech University, which was pretty much a couple of days where you met with a lot of other students who did other career techs, like if you know HOSA, the medical CTSO, or FBLA, FFA, things like that. So that was a really good opportunity for me to network, as well as kind of, like Heather said, get my priorities straight in terms of what I believed in pursuing in my future. Because again, time sucks are not a very obvious thing when you first look at them, but if you realize that you don't like it, you should just quit. The summer after my junior year, I also just did a lot of stuff with DECA since I had just gotten elected as president. So I had to go to the in-person version of that training camp, as well as do a lot of planning on my own and things like that. Throughout these summers, I also was involved pretty briefly in a few political organizations. So I did some policy work for the climate activism groups out there. I worked alongside Heather in a Young Dems thing, which definitely was not very high up on my resume or my Common App, but I did participate in that. But kind of overall, what I'm trying to say is that you can focus on one or two things over your summers, or you can like do nothing at all, like I did my freshman year summer, and you should be okay. I don't think that overloading yourself with activities is really good. Right now, over the summer, I'm doing a startup, or I'm a part of a startup. So I'm interning there, and I'm also trying to look for a couple jobs to maybe save some money. So again, enjoy yourself over the summer, regardless of what your parents say. You're okay. You should be okay.
Cool. Okay. Our next question, can you talk about the foreign languages you chose in high school? Do you think choosing Chinese is a disadvantage?
Okay, I guess I'll speak. So for the high school that Grace and I go to, the graduation requirement is to fulfill 2 levels, like consecutively of one language. So you can do like Chinese 1 and Chinese 2, or maybe you can do Spanish 1 and Spanish 2. Personally, for me, I'd never took any language classes in high school. I just tested out a Chinese 1 and Chinese 2 via proficiency exams. Those covered my graduation requirements, and that's all I did for language. I don't think there's any particular disadvantages in choosing languages. I think there's only advantages, because I know people who would study a language all 4 years of high school, and maybe they would want to pursue that as a minor in college. So again, I don't think the foreign languages you choose in high school really make much of a big deal, unless it's a big deal for you personally.
Yeah, I'll go afterwards. Sorry, I also took Chinese. Again, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, especially if you already have that background. And I know probably 99% of you on the call do have background in Chinese or have some experience speaking Chinese. So it was kind of an easy way to get it off of my transcript early. So I did take the proficiency test for Chinese 1 and 2, and during last year, I took the proficiency test for Chinese 3, which I still don't know if I passed or not because they never emailed me back. So maybe I did, maybe I didn't, but overall, no disadvantage. Just take advantage of the skills you were blessed with by being born Chinese and carry it on.
I also went down the Chinese language route. So I took it for 3 years of high school, and those 3 years were requirements. But I ended up taking AP Chinese junior year outside of school because our school did not offer AP Chinese, unfortunately. But as everyone else is saying, there is no disadvantage to taking a language that you already speak because it's just going to make the class easier, and you can put your time and effort into something else, like a different course. So rather than having to worry about like learning the fine details of Latin, you can put more effort into your math courses or something like that. I know that one kind of like common grievance about studying Chinese is that it makes you like too common of an applicant because, you know, all the other Chinese applicants are also studying Chinese. But if you're looking for a kind of like unique value in yourself, language is really not where you're going to find it. You can, you know, learn an interesting hobby, but when you talk about like something as difficult as a language, you just kind of want to go with the easiest route, which is usually going to be a language that you already know how to speak.
Good advice. Okay, so this should be the last question. And if anyone else has any questions, I recommend they send it right now. Otherwise, this will be the last question we're going to be answering. So for those schools you applied, did you visit some of them in person before submitting your application? Or did you try to learn those universities by online resources?
For me, I did not visit Cornell before I applied. I definitely went into it blind, and I basically only used the website and probably other online sources of students who are talking about Cornell and why they applied, or in general, kind of online forums. Yeah, A2C, which is not a good place to be, but definitely also influenced my decision a little bit. So yeah, you don't actually have to visit. I think a lot of colleges already know that it's probably not economically viable for students to visit a whole bunch of colleges. And additionally, because of COVID, it's way harder to be able to get there and schedule a tour and things like that. Actually, I'm going to kind of plug the startup that I'm a part of because they're asking me to get signups. We're trying to get 50,000 student signups before the end of the summer. So I joined a startup called Ivy Tours, free 360 tours of colleges. Also, if you're an incoming college student, we're also looking for tour guides. So again, plugging this right here. If you want to know more, contact me. I need to fill out this email list, and they are on my back. They are hounding me for more people. And it's actually really interesting because you get a more personalized view of your college. So sorry, plugging that in there.
Okay, I'll go next. I did, like, the years leading up to my college admissions process, I did tour a couple colleges, but the only college that I ended up like actually applying to that I did visit beforehand was Rice, and that was in maybe like September or October of my senior year. I'm not too sure, but I think by default, when you're trying to put together your college list and write your essays, you're going to be looking at those online resources anyways. So it's not really like an either or thing, like, should I visit the campus or should I do my research online? Like, you're going to be doing your research online. It's just like, do I have the like economic resources to go and visit this campus and whatnot? And if this is more of like a demonstrated interest question about like, if I visit the college, will it look better on my application? A lot of colleges actually don't track demonstrated interest. That's just up to you to research beforehand. But it's like, it's by no means a necessity to go look at your college in person. I think you can get like a pretty good view and idea of what your college is like just based off of looking at those university websites and then going onto those forums and like reading comments by either current students, former students, applicants that did tour, and etc.
For me, I did not tour Cornell or visit its campus before I applied. And for the other colleges I applied to, I did not intentionally go to look at any campuses. Like if you're in the city and the campus is close by, I would recommend you go tour it if you're ever just visiting a city for some reason. But as everyone else said, I think a very good tool is the internet. So on YouTube, there's definitely going to be a day in the life of, for example, a Cornell student. That's something I searched up a lot. There's also going to be your online forums, like applying to college, and also your college or like your dream college definitely does have a subreddit. Now, the subreddit does not give the best indicator of like the general population, because just the fact of being on Reddit is not like, it's not everyone is on Reddit, so you don't get the best opinion, of course. But I would say that you can definitely get like a sense of the academics of the clubs and the extracurriculars just from being on the internet. So that's something you definitely want to do, or especially if you're a junior applying.
Okay, great. I think that is the last question, and I'm gonna do a small plug because I was told to. There's a Share and Grow student board election, which is the student board I'm on. If you want to know a little bit more, we do a lot of like volunteer stuff. So if you want to get those hours in, you should join us. And if you like helping out your community, you should also join us. But there's more info at our website. And yeah, let me see if there's any other. Okay, yeah, so that'll be it. And I'd like to thank again our 3 graduates, and best of luck to you guys in your future college life and things. And other than that, I think we are free to go. And thank you again to those who shared.
All right, thanks everyone for coming. Have a nice day.
Thank you,
Thank
Derek,
you.
Heather, and Grace. Do you want to take a picture together?
Or we can do that.
Let's do a Zoom picture together. And people like whoever you're interested in, feel free to join our picture session as well. It's awesome to have. I mean, it's really wonderful to have you. And thank you so much for running overtime to share your experiences. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. It was a pretty fun time talking with everyone.
Yeah. So let's do a screenshot. I'm going to do a screenshot. So how about Winnie, you're in charge. You can, are you saying cheese or say cheese? Either way.
Oh, okay.
Or you can do a heart. Yeah, like just 4 of you. So maybe you do something like that or whatever. I don't know what's the new signals. Like I'm pretty old generation. So.
Do I take the screenshot?
Well, I can take the screenshot.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
you'll bring the picture.
Oh, okay. 3, 2, 1, cheese.
Okay, hold on. I'm sorry. I think just got another new chat. Thank you. So let's do again. Sorry, the chat
Okay.
just disrupted my picture.
Okay.
Thank you. 3,
Okay.
yeah.
3, 2, 1, cheese.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, we're done. Okay. Thank you so much. You have a nice evening, and let's stay in touch and enjoy the college life. And hopefully we can have you back next year to share your college experience. Will be very exciting. You take care.
All right, thank you so much.
Bye. Have a nice evening. Bye.
You too. Bye.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.